So there's never a dull moment in the world of college football. Rivalry week is over. Some pretty good matchups. Conference championships are set, and the coaching carousel, the craziest coaching carousel and the craziest story probably in the history of college football when it comes to coaching happened. Today, really, as I am recording this here on Sunday night, November 30th. It'll be December 1st, at least when you're watching this or when you're listening to this. This is College Football Y'all, by the way. My name's Brandon Taylor. I really appreciate it. All of you listening or watching, please support the podcast. Please support the channel if you do like college football and you enjoy some of what we're doing here. I only ask that you like some of what I say. I'm not asking that you love everything. But man, if you were like following anything this weekend, you caught some kind of drama. You at least caught some good matchups. If you're not worried about all the coaching carousel stuff, there was at least some good matchups this weekend. One of them being the big matchup in the Big Ten, the big rivalry between Ohio State and Michigan. Ryan Day searching for a victory over Michigan. I feel like, regardless of what he's done, they're the defending national champions. Those Ohio State fans have been yearning for a defeat over Michigan because that is much like the Egg Bowl, much like the Iron Bowl. You could say that the cocktail party, Florida and Georgia, is similar as well. There's this hatred and, fan bases, regardless of what happens in a season, they hate to lose to their rival. You could lose every game. You beat your rival, boom, there's something to hang your hat on at the end of the season. But on Saturday, Ohio State and Michigan, a cold and snowy Michigan Stadium there in Ann Arbor. Pretty good game. It was kind of a, back and forth defensive battle. Ohio State pulls away. They get the victory. Ryan Day gets his victory over Michigan, and they're cementing themselves right there in the Big Ten championship game versus Indiana coming up this Saturday, where who knows what can happen in that one, honestly. You got the only two undefeated teams left in the country in that one because Texas A&M lost to Texas. There's another, there's something else to that. It's Texas A&M loss and an Auburn loss, which, in return, two big losses and two big rivalry games would have sent Ole Miss to the SEC championship game. Georgia cemented themselves. They beat Georgia Tech and at a neutral site whatsoever. We know that Georgia Tech sold the rights because they were going to be at home, right? They sold their rights to the game to Mercedes-Benz Stadium for millions of dollars. And, a rivalry game should always be, this may be me, but I think a lot of people would agree, rivalry games need to be played at home stadiums. And I can understand Georgia Tech wanting a little bit of money. That helps them, for all purposes. I don't know exactly what they would use that money for, but it's there for them. This game is a little competitive early, but Georgia wins, much like Ohio State. Georgia got it done, and they're going to the SEC title game, and they're pretty much locked for the playoffs, regardless of what happens in the SEC championship game. There's a whole shakeup in the ACC. Man, this deal with Miami. Are they going to make it in? Are they not? You got Duke and Virginia. ACC has been a real wreck here this season. Man, it is not what I expected it to be. And then you have Auburn and Alabama, the Iron Bowl, going down to the wire there in Jordan-Hare. Night game in Jordan-Hare. Anything can happen. Ole Miss was, if they wanted college football, ACC championship hopes and maybe college football playoff hopes, they were rooting for Auburn. And Auburn, man, what a competitive game, incredible game there. And if Auburn can catch the ball, if Auburn can hold on to the ball, if Auburn can prevent penalties in crucial moments, they beat Kalen DeBoer's Alabama team, and Auburn puts Ole Miss into the SEC championship game. That didn't happen. Alabama prevailed. It's going to be Alabama and Georgia for the SEC next Saturday in Mercedes-Benz Stadium there in Atlanta. Now, that whole dynamic about Ole Miss, obviously Ole Miss won the Egg Bowl pretty handily down there in Starkville at Davis Wade Stadium on Friday morning or Friday afternoon is when it ended. And Lane Kiffin's last game as the head coach of the Ole Miss Rebels. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I think Ole Miss's hopes always you want to go to the SEC championship game and at least have that, like in your program as like a milestone. And Ole Miss has had SEC championships way, 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 way back in the mid 1900s. No SEC championship game appearances. And obviously, especially in an unprecedented year like this one, where you go 11-1 in conference play, a few plays against Georgia away from being undefeated in the regular season, and you miss out on the SEC championship game. This year, though, I think it's better for the Rebels to have missed out on that game, honestly. And I think a lot of people, a lot of Rebel fans share that sentiment, especially with what's going on with Lane Kiffin. And I really want to push the Lane Kiffin thing back because I know I'm going to spend the majority of this podcast on that. But there's an interesting thing going on. And the playoff this year, you've got obviously Ohio State and Indiana. I would say Texas Tech and Georgia are cemented. Like, they're in. I think Oklahoma is pretty much in. Ole Miss now, even though they're at number 7, they have a chance because of this coaching change and all that stuff that we'll get into in a minute. They have a chance of getting pushed out of the playoff, or maybe not pushed out in the playoff, but pushed up a couple spots, basically taking the home playoff game in the first round from them, which is devastating to the program. Notre Dame, they'll find their way in. I'd say they're pretty much in, and there's a list of teams. I brought 6 teams, I believe, that there's only a couple spots left for, and who's going to go? There's the issue with the ACC. Maybe we'll see a little bit of clarity Tuesday on how this is going to end up going. Also, one thing you have to look for: Alabama right now is in the last spot. Obviously, if they win the SEC, they're in. They're in. It's a guaranteed spot. If they lose, though, will enough things happen, depending on this week? If Alabama, for example, if Alabama is still at 10 on Tuesday, if enough things happen and Alabama loses the SEC title game, does the committee put them in again? Does the committee, yet again, in another year, find a way to include Alabama like they did just a couple years ago with the Florida State debacle? That's all questions that I can't answer. You can't answer that because we have a committee that is, I don't even know what the right word to say is. Incompetent, maybe. There's also the conflicts of interest. There's the fact that, I don't believe that sitting athletic directors should be in a position like this. Furthermore, especially ones that are in the middle of a coaching search. Speaking of coaching searches, Arkansas, I just completely butchered that. Arkansas, taking a coach from Memphis. You got Auburn taking a coach from UCF, Alex Galesh. You've got John Summerall from Tulane going to the Florida Gators. We'll reference that here in a moment. Some other movement around. I just got word that Kentucky will be looking for a new coach as well. Mark Stoops is going to be out as the coach of the Kentucky Wildcats, and that could have been predicted. Now, he's been one of those guys that were on the hot seat all year. So, as we see at this point, the SEC is in that cycle that we seem to get in every few years where, the coaching turnover happens. There's obviously your coaches that have longevity in the league, but it seems like, there's one or two every 2-3 seasons. But then there's like this big mass exodus of firings and hirings that happen, every few years, it seems like. And this cycle is one of the bigger ones, one of the craziest ones. And this is really revolving around Lane Kiffin. See, I went 10 minutes and I tried to push this off as far as I could, but I can't any longer. Because this thing with Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss to become the new head coach for the LSU Tigers. And if you're an LSU Tiger, the majority of the ones that I'm seeing online that are outspoken about this stuff are thrilled about this. There are some people that see this and maybe they don't like the way that he's handled things. There's fans that think, well, what has he done to deserve all this money and deserve this spot here at LSU? All reasonable questions. But before we get to really the thing, the main event that happened here, let's look at Lane Kiffin. Let's look at what he's done so far at Ole Miss and his time at Ole Miss. 55-19, 32-17 in conference play there as head coach for Ole Miss. He took the job in December of 2019. 2020 was his first year, although most people considered that year zero. So if you go from 21 to 25, man, talking about 50 wins in 5 years. That's incredible. He went 3-2 in bowl games, including two New Year's Six bowls. He lost in the Sugar Bowl, and more recently, a win in the Peach Bowl. Pretty good. We're talking about 4 10-win seasons. And that's including the first 11-win regular season in school history. That is this year. One thing that Lane Kiffin will not be doing, though, is coaching in the college football playoff. He's out. And, you know, the thing about Keith Carter, athletic director Keith Carter at Ole Miss, has made many incredible hires, including that of Lane Kiffin. He hired Chris Beard, the basketball coach, for example, and he led the Rebels to a Sweet 16 appearance just last season. There's been a lot of success in Keith Carter's tenure there. Keith Carter's a guy that he's an Ole Miss guy. He absolutely loves the program. He bleeds red and blue. He played basketball for the Rebels back in the early 2000s. He's all about Ole Miss. He is 100% devoted to the Rebels. And as far as I'm concerned, he'll have that job as long as he wants it. Glenn Boyce, the chancellor of the university, Ole Miss has a chancellor, whereas some schools have a president. It's the same position, just a different name. Glenn Boyce came in to become the new chancellor at Ole Miss just a few years back, and man, what an incredible hire, because he is a great representative of the university. And not only that, you know, the academic side, but he is so devoted to athletics as well. And for somebody like Lane Kiffin to have a chancellor that is bought in, an athletic director that is bought into everything surrounding you, your program, giving you every single thing that you need, paying you, and giving you raises, you got incentives, you know, those usual things. Putting up with a lot of nonsense and doing what a lot of other athletic directors in the league and in the NCAA as a whole would not put up with. Basically giving you free reign to do whatever you want. And then more recently here, offering everything that LSU and everything that Florida offered you at being Ole Miss, offered the same thing. So it's not, nobody was going to be outbid. The only way that Kiffin was going to leave the Rebels was going to be if he just wanted to go. And that's what happened here. And he's down there at LSU. He's going to get paid a bunch of money. And God bless him. I just hope he can take all that. Because, you know, the length of the leash that Ole Miss had him on stretches miles. The leash that LSU will have him on will be short. Because one thing that LSU fans are not going to put up with, it's things like tweeting using your dog's Twitter account, a day or two after a loss, poking fun at things. Trolling the fan base on that Twitter feed and your own Twitter feed. Stirring up controversies around personal issues. And we'll get into positives and negatives and baggage of Lane Kiffin here in a moment. But Ole Miss did what they had to do here to protect Ole Miss, and that's admirable on my part. I don't care. Look, if you're looking through purple and gold glasses, that's fine. You as a fan for LSU should be excited. You're getting a new coach. You had all this success, and then Brian Kelly comes and ruins it all for you. Okay? And somehow you think, while Brian Kelly was not a fit, suddenly Lane Kiffin's a fit. Okay, whatever. But let's turn the page here before I go too deep on that rant, and let's talk about Lane Kiffin a minute. And let's just talk about the positives of Kiffin's tenure for the Ole Miss Rebels. First of all, he elevated the program. Now, this is a program that was in disarray, stemming from the Matt Luke years. But the Matt Luke years were handicapped by Hugh Freeze's negligence, his negligence that crippled the program. And that whole fiasco with the NCAA sanctions, all those things that Hugh Freeze did. And then it was just the disgraceful ending to that whole thing was, man, it's a time that personally I don't want to relive. Like I mentioned earlier, we had 4 10-win seasons, including the first 11-win regular season in school history. This season, going to be more wins than that. Potential playoff berth. I say potential because, like I mentioned earlier as well, you never know with the playoff committee. But Kiffin will not be coaching that. He elevated the program to national status and popularity. It's no doubt that Lane Kiffin is a big name. And wherever he goes and wherever he is, he's going to bring that publicity. He's going to bring that popularity to him. He's got a big head because of that. I mean, you can tell. And the thing about Kiffin making it all about himself, being narcissistic, whatever psychological term you'd like to use, there's a lot of truth to that. But he is the brand. Okay? It is him. It's not... He's not ingrained in the brand. It's he is the brand. But with positives for Kiffin, there's a whole lot of baggage and there's a whole lot of negatives. And one that, if you're on Twitter, if you're on the internet, you're going to see these things come out in the next days and weeks. And that's controversies surrounding his personal life. And that's like relationships, for example, that have taken away from football. And I don't want to get like TMZ level stuff here. There's some speculations about some things that took place during game week of the Kentucky game back in 2024. A game that Ole Miss lost that was the first start of Ole Miss losing failing to make it to the playoff. It was that loss and then the Florida loss. The LSU loss, you could expect that. You don't expect to lose Kentucky. And if you don't lose Kentucky, you make the college football playoff with one of the best teams that you've ever had, with a first-round draft pick on offense and a first-round draft pick on defense. There's issues with players because of certain personal issues and speculation around Ulysses Bentley. And if you know who Ulysses Bentley is, you'll know that he was placed on the bench last season, 2024, and he was no doubtably the best running back on the team, but for some reason, a third-string backup, a converted wide receiver, and some other players got way more carries than he did. There was more to it than that. Whatever the Kiffin's thing about evaluating and them just not putting the best guy on, not trying to not. How do I say this? Kiffin's belief was that Ulysses Bentley was not the guy to start not the guy to get all the carries because they believed he was not in their best interest, the best guy to help them win. And if I just, fumbled all those words there, it's because that's exactly what it was. A mess, a jumbled up mess. No way that you can smooth that over. It was an absolute mess. And everything that Kiffin said about the Ulysses Bentley situation, and give it to Ben Garrett, and I'll mention Ben Garrett probably a few times here in this. He's a beat writer there. He's affiliate of On3, and he has been somebody that has asked Kiffin tough questions the whole time that Kiffin has been there at Ole Miss. And that is admirable for him, for a journalist, from a journalistic standpoint, to ask Kiffin those tough questions. And he pounded Kiffin about the Ulysses Bentley situation because Ben Garrett himself knew that whatever Lane was spewing about this was completely BS. And that's exactly what it was. And there's a lot of speculation, and maybe more than speculation. Maybe it's not so speculative about the personal issues that is the reason that Kiffin kept him on the bench. There's the tweeting, the trolling on the internet. Oh, man. This one here is in depth. That includes things like holding the possibility of taking other jobs over the head of the fan base. Tweeting garbage through your dog's Twitter account. The tendency to always look forward instead of focusing on the here and now. That's the Auburn job, the Florida job, the LSU job. Other jobs, including Arkansas and Miami, have had mutual interest over the past few years. And there's probably more. And this all culminates with, oh boy, Lane Kiffin wanting his cake and eating it too. And like a petulant child demanding that he have it his way. And if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to sabotage the whole program. I'm going to burn every bridge, and I'm going to destroy and cripple the program on my way out because you didn't give me what I wanted. A Power 4 team cannot allow a coach that is committed to a rival school in conference to continue to be in your facility with your players, your coaches, and we're talking about at least another month. You just can't do it. There's a comparison to the John Sumrall situation at Tulane. Happy for John Sumrall. He's going to be the next head coach at the Florida Gators. Honestly, Florida Gator fans are pissed because they wanted Kiffin. Scott Strickland is a terrible athletic director, and I've given him plenty of hell here on this podcast and over the past few years, and he deserves every bit of it. Florida, you may have dodged a bullet with Kiffin. Summerall's a good guy, man. And he would have been a great candidate for Auburn. He would have been a great candidate for Ole Miss. He ended up going to there for the Gators. But the comparison for the Summerall situation. So Tulane is destined to make it to the college football playoff. And Summerall wants to be allowed to coach Tulane if they do make it in the playoff. And Florida granted him that ability, and he's going to do that. These are in no way comparable situations. The jump from the group of five to the Power 4 is in no way at all comparable. Happens all the time. Happens every year. Summerall's a classy guy, man. And this is in no way comparable because if you look at the situations here, beyond the G5 to P4 thing, in conference rival, in SEC to SEC, it would even be different if this was like SEC to Big 10, SEC to Big 12, SEC to ACC, or vice versa, many of those. That would even be different. The fact that you're going to go to a bitter rival and you want to stay around and coach into the playoffs, and you do this whole media thing and all the stuff about Jimmy Sexton and the CAA. That is actually my next point. And you got Nick Saban and Kirk Herbstreit on College Game Day, among many others at ESPN and other entities that are that push that narrative that Kiffin should be allowed to coach in the college football playoff. You should let him go. And it's pity on you, Ole Miss. It's bad for you, Keith Carter, that you forced Kiffin out, that you did not let him coach his team. Should be ashamed of yourself. Analysts saying that the players should be the ones to decide on this. They should get a vote if their coach wants to stay. Let me tell you something, folks. The situation has lingered for weeks and weeks. Players are fed up with Kiffin. There are some things that happened in that facility on Sunday with players, especially the leaders. There's a group of 12 leaders, the players, that is, that basically it's like a players' council. And they had a meeting this morning, and man, this is when you're glad to see that guys like TJ Daugherty, for example, he saw through Kiffin's stuff for weeks. There's actually a report that at one of the practices, I'm assuming this week, TJ Daugherty asked Kiffin where his purple was at. It's kind of funny. But basically the players wanted him out. Simplest way to say it. So to say that, well, there's no issue here, you should let the players decide. The players said, no, bro, you better get on out of here. And you've put assistant coaches in a bind throughout this whole process, and you've got families that are going to, fear the brunt of this. And there's this whole narrative about Keith Carter, Ole Miss, and an ultimatum. There was no ultimatum. So they had to know. LSU had to know. Ole Miss had to know. You had to make some decision. Okay? You can't hold the program hostage. But then, Lane Kiffin himself, causes all this trouble because supposedly Ole Miss give him an ultimatum, but then he gives an ultimatum to the assistants and saying, hey, if you don't get on the plane today, you will never work for me again. Trying to literally, if Keith Carter, Glenn Boyce does not allow Lane Kiffin to coach in the playoff, I'm taking all the staff with me, and I will cripple this team. He told Marty Smith at the airport that was all a big lie. No, man. Lane Kiffin give the assistant coaches an ultimatum. Put them on the spot, saying, right now, this second, you better decide, and I don't care. We don't have time to waste. You're either getting on the plane with me today or we're done. Not caring about the families, not caring about spouses, not caring about kids that have friends at their own school. Assistants that, if you're an assistant coach at a college football team, you're moving a lot. And that is hard on families. Putting himself in front of everything else, man, it is further proving that everything that he claimed he was is BS for the most part. For Lane Kiffin, he said Oxford needed him more than he needed Oxford. Or he needed Oxford more than Oxford needed him. That was a little misspeak there. Or was it? I believe Kiffin was changed. I believe Oxford and Mississippi did a lot of really positive things for him. I think he changed in a lot of parts. I think that he's proud that he got to spend the last years and moments of his dad's life together with him there at Ole Miss. That his family, came to Oxford, moved to Oxford, and everybody was together. That he made personal changes in his life for the better. The sobriety, the getting healthier, doing all these things, and maybe mentally and physically changing as a person. And I believe every bit of that. But deep down inside, the insecurities and the issues and the past, Lane Kiffin is still there. It's hiding behind the facade of all that other stuff. And I still believe all that other stuff is there, and it's very important to him. And I think he does have a lot of gratitude towards Oxford and towards Ole Miss. But he's burned the program down on the way out. He's discredited himself, and just a snap, just like that, he has ruined every good grace that he had. This fan base has put up with all of this for years. If you would have stayed, Kiffin, if you would have stayed and signed the extension, coached this team through the playoffs, winning heals wounds. I said this before. Winning heals wounds. Scars do last forever, but healing does at least heal the wounds. There will be no healing of wounds, and the scars will last forever. You know, you thought the Tennessee deal was bad, the way he left Tennessee. This isn't comparable. You thought Tommy Tuberville saying that they'll have to take him out of Oxford in a pine box, the only way he'd leave the program, only way he'd leave the school, and then immediately takes the Auburn job. There is no other event that's ever occurred in college football that compares to this. Probably never will. If you took a poll and you went around the country and you asked coaches in this situation with a team, unprecedented success, 11-1, bound for college football playoff. Big jobs are open. Big life-changing jobs are open. What do you do? Well, I think most of the coaches would realize, yes, while we make a lot of money doing this, life isn't fair. Life isn't fair to the poor. Life isn't fair to middle-class people. Life isn't fair to multi-million-dollar coaches. Regardless of who you are in this world, life is not fair. And if you're saying on one hand, I have an 11-win team destined for the playoff, a lot of success, fan support, more than ever before. And then on this hand, you've got another job's coming open, a big job, legacy job. I can win national titles. I think I can win national titles. I can win national titles over here. Well, it's on this hand, I'm going to be competing for one, or this over here. The majority of people would say, okay, it's really unfortunate that this job over here in the left hand, this big job, this big life-changing legacy position has opened up. But this situation over here in my right hand is occurring, and it's big. It's huge. Not just for me, but for the fan base, for the state, for the players. The majority of coaches would say, you know what? Life isn't fair. I'm gonna have to turn down that big job. I'm signing the extension and I'm staying with this team, and that's what we're gonna do. Because you can't live your life. You just can't. Most people do not live their life like that. You say, well, situations just don't add up for me. It just didn't work out this time. This is what I've got to do. Not for Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin said, I'll be damned if I'm going to, choose all this, do what everybody else would do. I'll be damned if I'm going to stay and stick with the team that I built with the D2 quarterback that my assistants went out and found that turned out to be a gem, an absolute gem. Players, man, Kewan Lacey. You get this guy Lacey from Missouri. Just had a few snaps. He comes to Ole Miss, and he is a game changer, man. Breaking records in just 1 year at Ole Miss. Generational, unprecedented, just mind-blowing success in a rebuild year. No, I'm good, brother. I'm good. I'm going to burn everything down on the way to this other job where I basically am going to try to do the same thing I'm doing here. Although, I think everything's going to be better down there. That's Lane Kiffin. But the thing about Lane Kiffin is not like you and I. And even self-centered, narcissistic people out there, even you may say, well, Lane Kiffin's not like me either. Because why would you leave something? Your goal is to go to the college football playoff, to put your name on the list of coaches that have coached for the college football playoff or in the college football playoff, compete for a national title, maybe even go or maybe even win. And you have a chance to do that now, but you want to burn that to go do the exact same thing, except you have to rebuild from scratch because the last guy was a moron. Maybe Kiffin wants to go to LSU because, the truth of the matter is Kiffin's not, he's a CEO. He's a figurehead. He's not a big recruiter. And that's what the college football playoff committee is going to have to understand, that Kiffin is a CEO. Yeah, he does a lot of things with the offense. Yeah, he does all of what he's done, and he deserves every single ounce of credit, and I will give him every single ounce of credit. Man, it was in a hell of a 6-year run there. But Kiffin was only a piece of the Ole Miss puzzle. Assistant coaches like Pete Golding busted his tail to go out there and recruit and to keep this team together. Pete Golding, for just one of many. Joe Judge, quarterback's coach. Charlie Weiss Jr., offensive coordinator. And all the staff under him and under on the offensive and defensive side. They're the ones that should get a lot of credit as well, and they don't. Kiffin gets all the credit. But that's what head coaches do. They get the credit with success. They get all the blame when losses happen, when bad things happen. That's just how it is in football. That's how it is in most sports, actually. But Pete Golding, a truly dedicated Mississippi guy. He's not from Mississippi. He's from Louisiana. He went to college in Mississippi. He's coached in Mississippi before. His wife's from here. He is 100%, he loves the state. He's 100% dedicated to Ole Miss and to the state. And in unprecedented times, sometimes you have to make unprecedented moves, and Pete Golding is the new, not interim, the head coach of the Ole Miss Rebels. And this is something that, just like that, unfolded. Penn State has been looking for a coach for like 7 years. Pete Golding gets hired in 7 minutes this morning. Like I said, he's done the brunt of the recruiting. And he's picked up a lot of slack for Kiffin, man. And like I said, Joe Judge gets a lot of that credit too. Without him, first of all, when Pete Golding came to the program in 2022, he actually had to help Kiffin revamp the whole recruiting process because there really was not a process. It was just, winging it basically. Pete Golding understood that, you got to get high school guys. Kiffin knew that, but he didn't want to put the effort in. That's why he was so dependent on the transfer portal. See, the whole narrative is if you can't get high school recruits into a Mississippi college. That's not entirely true. Pete Golding's the reason they got who they did get. And there's some gems in there. Kiffin connects with players, but he's not going to go out there and build relationships. He's not going to go out there and, recruit all the players. Yeah, he goes out there and he does recruiting and this and that. But Kiffin gets all the credit for the recruiting. You see him with pictures with recruits. That's after the assistants have done all the work, and he just does the final piece of everything. And that should be a red flag to LSU fans. If you didn't like Brian Kelly's approach to coaching, that he doesn't have relationships with players, that he may have a relationship with some, but he's not going to go out of his way like most coaches would and should, successful coaches even. If you didn't like Brian Kelly's approach to the program, who says you're going to like Lane Kiffin's? And there's another thing, like Ole Miss, this was a disaster. For all this to happen, you lose your head coach that's won all these games and put your team in a position to go to the college football playoff. And then you have to promote from within. Well, first of all, you're destined for the playoff. You had to move quick. That was the easiest way to retain as much staff as possible and to salvage the season. I mean, that was all you could do. The defensive staff, for the most part, is all been retained. That's very good. That's a really big positive. Pete Golding, obviously defensive coordinator. His defensive staff is staying. Now, for the offensive side of the ball, there's going to be some turnover. That's just how it is. Charlie Weiss Jr., the offensive coordinator, one of the guys that actually got on the plane with Kiffin today. And if you haven't seen the video of Kiffin leaving the Manning Center, basically getting on the plane there at Oxford University Airport, seek out one of those videos, man, because he did not get a welcome departure. He was welcomed, but he was welcomed by a lot of number ones and a lot of expletives and vulgar terms, spewed out there. But it's all warranted. It's all warranted. But Charlie Weiss Jr. got on the plane with Kiffin. I'm hearing that he may not. He's possibly gone. How do I say it? He's going down there to scope everything out. He may not. He may stay with Ole Miss, but if you're going to get on the plane and go down there, man, I mean, the chances of you coming back are slim to none. So put him as a maybe, but probably gone. Joe Cox, tight ends coach, is gone. You got a couple of receiver coaches that are gone as well. And obviously Chris Kiffin, Lane Kiffin's brother. You could have expected him to go, and that's perfectly fine because, that's just to be expected. Family sticking together there. Kevin Smith, for example, jury's still out on him. He and Kiffin go back, and what it is I know he's going to stay here for the rest of the season, stay at Ole Miss, but whether he'll follow Kiffin after the season's over, that's to be determined. And this is a fluid situation. You just hope for Ole Miss that you can keep as many guys as you can, but I want to bring this up because, Pete Golding being a defensive coordinator, and all these other teams are hiring sitting head coaches, and then here you are, an SEC team, and all this having to promote a coach. There's been plenty of coordinators that have a lot of success in their first head coaching job. If you want to talk about a coordinator that was promoted to head coach, look at Ryan Day there at Ohio State. He was an offensive coordinator. Promoted in 2019. Well, that's done pretty well for him. Dabo Swinney. He had several offensive positions from 2003 to 2008. And 2008 to now, he's been the head coach at the Clemson Tigers, multiple national championships. Dan Lanning at Oregon was the Georgia defensive coordinator from 2019 to 2021. That's not exactly the same because it wasn't a promotion from within, but he did go from being a defensive coordinator into a head coaching position. It's working out for him. What about Kirby Smart at Georgia? He was the Alabama defensive coordinator from 2008 to 2015, and he took the head coaching job, his first head coaching job at Georgia, and look at what he's done. It's possible. It doesn't work always. Zach Arnett at Mississippi State, just a few years ago after the passing of Mike Leach. He got promoted from defensive coordinator, immediately got put as the head coach. It didn't work out. The only difference between him, the failures, And some of these coaches that I just mentioned here and there's others out there, coach for Nick Saban. How Pete differs from any of those situations is he's inheriting a team in great shape, a team bound for the playoffs. There's huge NIL and a balled-in athletic department and a fan base that is going to absolutely be behind him 100%. Maybe even more than Kiffin. I'm telling you right now. He worked for Saban, won a national championship in 2020, and for what it's worth, he worked for Kiffin for 3 seasons. Kiffin, who worked for Saban. So he worked for Saban, and then he worked for a coach that has a lot of the Saban's tendencies. Coaching, on the field and all those things. Not necessarily with character or anything else remotely close to Nick Saban, but whatever. So what I'm saying, he's cut from a similar cloth to many other successful coaches in college football today. But, basically the thing in all this, and I'll circle back to it, is for this season, because we're right in the middle of this fiasco with the college football playoff, does Ole Miss still get to host? It's up in the air. I don't see how you can leave out an 11-1 SEC team from the playoff, but they may drop a couple spots and lose the ability to host. And that'll be a darn shame. What more is there to say? Kiffin's going to LSU, and LSU fans are excited, and they should be. They got their guy. It's a mess, and there's nothing else to say. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching on this episode of College Football, y'all. My name is Brandon Taylor. Stay tuned for more content. The TikTok channel, I'm going to try to put more content up on there. That's Brandon TCFB there on TikTok, as well as X. Been posting a lot on X. Follow me there for my daily. Well, it's not crap posting, but I do share and comment and do all those things and tweet daily on Twitter. So see me there. See me on TikTok. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see, every time I post. But this has all been exhausting. It's been an exhausting few weeks, and I'm going to put this to bed for a few days at least. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Peace and love, everybody. See you next time.